Greetings, everyone. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to engage with you around these turbulent times. So I'm going to share screen, begin with a land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you from Minnesota, which is located on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the indigenous Dakota and Ojibwe people on land ceded in the treaties of 1837 and 1851. Minnesota is the birthplace of the American Indian movement. And in this photo is Nikki Bowman of the Lenape Mohegan Native American group. She's in Wisconsin and is one of the founders of Eval Indigenous. Nikki and I have been doing a good bit of work together. We've become accustomed to doing land acknowledgements, but the very first land acknowledgement I ever experienced in evaluation was at the 2005 Canadian Evaluation Association and AEA Joint Conference in Canada, where Brad was the co-program director with me on the American side. And the theme was crossing borders, crossing boundaries. And with the presidents of AEA and CES, we generated the first ever Speaking Truth to Power International Award, which was given to General Romeo Dallaire, who had been in charge of the United Nations peacekeeping forces in Rwanda, for his attempts in filing daily data about what was going on there, trying to prevent the genocide that ensued. And that award had never been given again, but it was an important part of recognizing that evaluation is affected by the things going on in the larger context in the world. And that's part of what I'm going to speak to as we go along, is the larger context that we're dealing with these days. Evaluation, we say, grew up in the projects. And in the last 50 years, we've gotten very good at evaluating projects and programs, how to do goal attainment, implementation evaluation, measure outcomes, logic models, doing findings, lessons, recommendations. But we've moved into being engaged with and being asked to do evaluation of mission, strategy, advocacy campaigns, policy change, systems change, complex dynamic interventions, evaluating community impacts, regional initiatives, networks and collaborations, leadership, inclusiveness and diversity, innovation, collective impact, scaling, environmental ecosystem sustainability, global systems change, transformation. None of these things are projects. And so we're being challenged with our project framing to deal with some of these new directions for the way systems change is going about. We've come out of a planning and evaluation frame that emphasizes command and control for planning and evaluation. Plan your work, work your plan, evaluate, heavy on accountability, heavy on summative judgment. But in our current world, with complex systems change, turbulence, uncertainty, rapid changes in things, innovation and adaptation have moved to the fore, situational responsiveness, ongoing learning, and ongoing development. And that's been the positioning of developmental evaluation. In the first edition of the book in 2011, the emphasis was upon treating innovation as different from doing a typically designed project or program. The timelines were different, the challenges were different, the uncertainties were different. It needed a much more responsive approach. In the new 2026 edition, we've developed a mnemonic to further position evaluation. And one of the big differences, and Brad's opening comment captures this, is that in 2011, we treated developmental evaluation as a very small niche. In the last 15 years, it's become really a very broad niche because of the turbulence and the rapid change in the world. During the coronavirus, the DE, developmental evaluation, really took off as everybody had to pivot. I did a blog early in the epidemic when I said we're all developmental evaluators now. Programs are pivoting, governance is pivoting, projects are pivoting, and evaluation had to pivot. Pivot became the word of the year. And so what we've offered in the new book is a framework that makes developmental evaluation broader and that includes looking at the ways in which evaluation more generally needs to be able to be agile, deal with the dynamic nature of the world, be actionable, be principled, and be timely. Agile, for example, means being able to respond to things quickly as conditions change. There aren't any fixed designs in developmental evaluation. Being able to respond to the dynamic nature of the world as things change, keeping a focus on what's actionable and doable. And because it's not based upon a series of steps or of predetermined design, the principles become more important because they provide direction and guidance. One of the changes in the 5th edition of utilization-focused evaluation that I co-authored with my daughter and partner is that we got rid of steps. The first 4 editions of utilization-focused evaluation were all based on steps. And we came to realize that steps are very linear. They treat the world as orderly, command and control. But in a turbulent, dynamic, rapidly changing world, we are grounded in principles. We navigate through principles because the steps are not linear. It could be at any place at any time, and the timeliness becomes important. Traditional evaluation has fixed time frames, a midterm evaluation and in a project evaluation. Times for reporting are predetermined at the beginning, but in a rapidly changing dynamic world of agility, the timing has to be flexible. And so the timing is to provide information as it's needed on an ongoing basis. In the post-pandemic world then, the turbulence has increased rather than decreased. We've got increasing war around the world. Hunger is at new levels that we haven't seen since World War II. The climate emergency is deepening. Rapid, widespread misinformation, disinformation, global inequities increasing, and all of these things interacting in a vicious circle have come to be what's called the polycrisis. And in that context, unfortunately, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are riding rampant. Pestilence, war, famine, and death. We're in a polarized world between truth and post-truth, between those of us who argue for facts, evidence, truth, data, reality, and thinking, versus post-truth, fake news, alternative facts, make-believe, groupthink, and distortions. And we're in that battle. We're a part of that world of trying to go with the evidence, with the polarization between political perspectives where they make up their facts and believe what they want to believe, and scientific efforts. That polarization is affecting how we engage in evaluation and how governance is done. The polarization includes the dominant view from autocrats and authoritarians that might makes right. And that frame goes back to 400 BC, when the ancient historian Thermidorides stated that, quote, right as the world goes is only in question between equals in power, while the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. The update and drawing upon that position came from President Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, in January of this year, when he said in an interview, quote, we live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else. But we live in a world, in the real world, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world since the beginning of time. The contrasting view expressed by Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was that right makes might. He said, let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it. We as evaluators are a part of this polarization. We are caught in it, as we are in the immigration debate. The Statue of Liberty that has represented for 200 years, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, and Donald Trump coming to office on a strong anti-immigration message promising to conduct mass deportation of millions of immigrants in the U.S. illegally. In Minnesota, we are ground zero for that campaign. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement in December sent 3,000 ICE agents into Minneapolis. The police force in Minneapolis and St. Paul is only 700 people. And so 3,000 ICE agents coming to arrest what were alleged to be illegal immigrants. And one of the targeted groups, especially, were Somalis. President Trump said that he considered Somalis garbage. He didn't want any of them in the country. He's forbid any future Somalis to come. 1 in 3 Somalis in the United States live in Minnesota. And he's called them criminals, vicious animals, garbage. My daughter, Charmaine, lives in the neighborhood in Minneapolis that is heavily Somali. The local neighborhood school that my grandkids go to is heavily Somali. And so she is among the parents who has joined the volunteer brigade of people who are monitoring ICE. They have vests that they wear, they have whistles, they use walkie-talkies because they can't use their phones to communicate because their phones are being monitored by ICE. And they observe what ICE agents are doing. They try to protect kids and immigrants and alert that when the ICE agents are in a place, that other community volunteers show up to bear witness to what's going on. It's been an amazing ground-up action, but it's also very scary. ICE agents have followed Charmaine home and sat in front of the house in a very threatening manner. Stephen Miller again has said, under President Trump's leadership, we are looking to set a goal of a minimum of 3,000 arrests for ICE every day, and the number is going to keep getting bumped higher over time. In January, the Wall Street Journal noted that ICE agents with arrest quotas are colliding with angry residents, a compact city, and a relatively small proportion of immigrants in Minnesota illegally. The result has been ICE agents to meet quotas hired in large numbers without sufficient training, using racial profiling to arrest people on the streets, and that's led to the arrest and detention of large numbers of U.S. citizens and non-criminal actors. The data on ICE arrests show that as the quota was increased and correspondingly arrests increased, the percent of those arrested with a criminal conviction actually fell. By October, 170 American citizens had been arrested, about 130 citizens arrested at demonstrations, including a dozen elected officials. Numerous citizens experienced violence at the hands of federal agents, including being dragged, tackled, beaten, tased, and shot. Two American citizens killed in Minneapolis. And yet, in sub-zero temperatures, the demonstrations, the widespread monitoring actually have contributed to trying to limit ICE. The mayor of Minneapolis said families have been torn apart, small businesses lost millions, students had their learning disrupted. That impact is real. And the system is invasive. The community remains gripped in fear and trauma. Small businesses are not able to operate. Immigrant businesses have closed. So immigrant students are afraid to go to school. Families are afraid to even go out to shop, to go to work. So there's a large network that has developed to get food to immigrant families, to help them with the basic necessities, and to protect them. As the demonstrations grew, ICE was supposedly going to be reduced. We're seeing some of that, but they're now bringing in bounty hunters to replace the ICE agents. And the disturbances and the protests and the community vigilance has made it more difficult for ICE to meet their quotas, which has actually made them more aggressive in trying to meet their quotas. And this is a phenomenon that evaluators recognize. The community volunteers observing ICE reported that agents were increasingly using covert tactics to escape surveillance. This is a data from community volunteers tracking the presence of ICE, the number of arrests that are going on, where they're located. This is a graph from community volunteers showing the movement of ICE into the suburbs increasingly. All of this is an example of Campbell's law. Don Campbell, who, in 50 years, we have one law in evaluation, Campbell's law. The more any quantitative social indicator is used for decision-making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures, and the more apt it will be to distort and corrupt the social processes it is intended to monitor. High-stakes quota indicators are likely to be corrupted, misused, and abused. That's how and why quotas can be dangerous. And so in the ICE situation, their quotas are for arrests, not for warranted arrests, not for justified arrests. And so they've arrested large numbers of people who end up being American citizens, being in the US legally, but that counts for the quota. And the interference with their being able to meet the quotas has increased the violent interactions. In the case of ICE, quotas for the number of arrests targeted have led to arrests of US citizens and legal immigrants. All of this is to say that we've been dominated in evaluation for the last 50 years, looking for good practices and what some call best practices. I don't think there is such a thing, but better practices. But what our current environment calls on us to do is to elevate our game in bad practices. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and we have to be witnesses to that. As an aside, I don't know that you're all fully aware that today is World Plumbing Day, a day to celebrate having hot showers, clean drinking water, sanitation. I mention this because in an article in the New York Times, a journalist from Minnesota wrote a column about the extensive network of people organized to resist ICE. And he included the story of a plumber from the suburbs who offered his services free to immigrants affected by the federal occupation. And in that column, he concluded, truly, when the suburban plumbers are against you, you know you're on the wrong side of history. Well, hopefully when the evaluators are against you, we can affirm that being on the wrong side of history, but we need to document the stuff that's going wrong, the bad stuff, not just the search for the good stuff. We've been imbalanced in that regard. I mentioned this example because one of the things that Brad has asked me to talk about is what can evaluators do? And I turned to this with the wisdom of Arthur Ashe, the great African-American tennis star, the first African-American to win the US Open, very heavily involved in civil rights. And he was regularly asked by students, what can I do? And his reply has become poster, widespread, worth repeating. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. That's what it calls on each of us, where we're located. My daughter in Minneapolis is helping with gathering data about what ICE is doing, aggregating that, and helping track what's happening. We have to become witnesses to what's happening, documenting, making the invisible visible. So in that regard, as we look at how the world has changed, let me take you back to 2015 and the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, called a transformative agenda for the world we want, leaving no one behind, documenting the huge disparity in wealth and privilege in the world. And the question is this the world we want? Or would we like to live in a world in which inequities have been banished for all humans, everywhere, anytime? And so the 17 Sustainable Development Goals were adopted with 169 targets by 2030 and 231 indicators. And in that world, we aren't doing so well. The 2024 SDG report opened by saying the world is in great upheaval. Only 17% of the SDG targets are on track, with nearly half showing minimal or moderate progress and over 1/3 stalling or regressing. And then in March of last year, in reaction to an Earth Day resolution at the United Nations, the United States under Trump said globalist endeavors like Agenda 2030 and the SDGs lost its ballot box. Therefore, the United States rejects and denounces the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals, rejects and denounces the tenor of the times. And so Trump has taken a wrecking ball to international aid, closing down U.S. aid, to DEI, to environmental protection, to education, to social programs of all kinds, and has withdrawn from climate agreements and environmental protection agreements in the United States, a form of destruction. But it's worth distinguishing two kinds of destruction because they have different evaluation implications. Creative destruction, going back to Schumpeter, was the focus of the 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics. 3 economists who are doing a contemporary work on the nature of creative destruction, which is the basis for innovation, new innovation replacing the old. But that's distinguished from regressive destruction, the Make America Great Again movement, which is power and treasure to the wealthy, doing away with the SDGs, doing away with support for the needy, and making it a world where the powerful and the wealthy are able to increase their power and wealth. This has led to global ripple effects. As I've traveled in the last year to conferences around the world, the distress is not just in North America. We are in a time of grief, anger, sadness, disbelief, and fear. The 4 horsemen of calumny, fear, ignorance, smear, and bigotry are also riding roughshod around the world. And there's a tendency in this climate to hunker down, have a survival mindset, conserve resources and energy, just get through this. The alternative is not to hunker down, but to up our game. The evaluation of destruction, when you're doing creative destruction, is to do innovation and developmental evaluation. It's one of the locuses, one of the themes that we have in the new book is about how to evaluate creative destruction with developmental evaluation. Regressive destruction, the kind that Trump is involved in, induces a lot of damage. And so one of the things that we need to be documenting that hasn't been part of our past is the damage that gets done. When things are going well, much of evaluation is about looking at whether outcomes get achieved and at what level. But we don't have a history of documenting damage, of documenting destruction. Millions of people are going hungry, are dying from lack of medical care, and the documentation of that is largely done by organizations who have a vested interest in trying to get funding for these things. We need solid evaluation of the depth and nature of damage, and we need to be able to look at the responses that are going on, documenting and studying the nature of resilience, the nature of resistance, the nature of regeneration. These are themes of people dealing with turbulence, uncertainty, and regressive destruction. So in 2015, the International Year of Evaluation, Stuart Donaldson, who's part of the consortium and here, was president. And the theme of that year and of the new evaluation in Partners Group was building national evaluation capacity. Eval Youth, Eval Indigenous, all emerged at that time. And with the International Cooperation Organization for Cooperation and Evaluation, IPDET, IDEAS, the International Evaluation Academy now, all began building national evaluation capacity around the SDGs. Stuart chose exemplary evaluations in a multicultural world as the theme in 2015, with a lot of emphasis on the SDGs and national evaluation capacity. And that's been the focus of global evaluation for the last 10 years. But in March of this year, a new global evaluation agenda was launched, taking into account the kind of things I've just been talking about. The launch of GEA, as it's called, 2.0, 1.0 now, was the focus on national evaluation capacity for the SDGs. Global Evaluation Agenda 2.0 takes a contrast to the dominant historical view of evaluators as neutral, objective technicians and methodologists, with evaluation defined as being techniques, methods, models, toolkits, and reports in service of funders, managers, and bureaucrats. The new global evaluation agenda is viewing evaluation as a visionary action for a sustainable, equitable future, making evaluation part of the transformative change process. And so in that global perspective, the challenge is to get beyond evaluation as a paperwork compliance activity, as simply a reporting activity, to a change, transformation, and systems transformation engagement. Instead of carrying on business as usual, GEA Global Evaluation Agenda 2.0 engages evaluators in combating ignorance, misinformation, disinformation, inequities, and the taking on the issues of climate and environment to defeat the denial of these things. GEA 2.0 makes it clear that we, evaluators, do not go quietly into the future to be enveloped and defeated by the darkness of denial. Denial of facts, denial of evidence, denial of climate change, denial of universal human rights. GEA 2.0 makes it clear that we, evaluators, commit to being part of the solution, not a deepening part of the problem. And so we have an obligation, wherever we are, using whatever we have and doing whatever we can to combat misinformation and disinformation, to connect together globally in support of each other, to thread together the diversity of evaluation perspectives into a meaningful change process. Strong national and regional associations can better collaborate, as your collaboration does, to address issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution of air, land, and water, ocean acidification, and humanitarian emergencies that span national boundaries. Building our capacity beyond methods in interpersonal competencies, cultural responsiveness, political savvy, data visualization, connecting the local and the global, having an intergenerational perspective, shaping AI for future fit evaluation, spotlighting evaluation criteria that include equity, gender equality, social and environmental justice, and cultural sensitivity. GEA 2.0 visualizes evaluation as an integral part of and making significant contributions to development by informing and guiding systems transformation processes and being a part of that transformation. The International Development Evaluation Association developed and adopted an Evaluation for Transformational Change manifesto, and we're moving from goal attainment to logic models to theory of change to now a theory of transformation in the evolution of evaluation. Last Earth Day, we adopted a resolution for evaluators worldwide, affirm our commitment to include environmental, social, and economic sustainability and regeneration criteria in all evaluations, shaped by principles of inclusiveness, human rights, transparency, interconnectedness, and adaptiveness, and therefore dealing with systems change. This is an evolutionary transition for evaluation, collaborating across boundaries worldwide to be agile, adaptable, responsive, resilient, and timely. Peter Drucker said, "The greatest danger of times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic." This calls us as evaluators to know where we stand. GEA 2.0 is values-grounded, learning-based, principles-driven, and difference-making for evaluation. That is how we together as a professional community can join in combating the forces that are trying to further separate and polarize the world. And we have a role to play in all of that. Let me stop there.